The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Well, the injuries keep piling up and we keep reacting to them. That seems to be the story these days. In the dog days of the NBA season. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris. This is a Hoop Ball presentation brought to you, as always, by our good pals at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. Forgot to mention them until the latter stages of yesterday's podcast. Not going to make that same mistake today. Want to get that name right out at the outset. We're busting through the opening gates and reminding you that Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company is the best of the best. They are our partners here at Hoop Ball in crime, in fantasy, and, of course, in caffeinated production. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. You can also check them out on Amazon by typing in Hawaiian Isles. That's it. So you got to type in that little top search bar, and they'll pop right up. 8-game Monday to recap. Tuesday to preview. We got the general gist of things right now. It's actually another 8-game Tuesday. This is my favorite stretch. When you had, I think it was 7 on Sunday, 8 on Monday, 8 on Tuesday. Wednesday gets big. You got 10 on Wednesday, only 4 on Thursday. I love it when it's 7 or 8 games every day. That gives you just enough to sort of keep the appetite there, but not an overwhelming number where at the end of the night you're blowing through weird hours of the morning trying to remember everything that went on. And you don't need 13 games a day for fantasy stuff to happen. You really only need a handful of games. And certainly stuff happened. There was things that occurred on Monday night. And we'll break them down, review a couple of things, talk about some revenge lines as we look ahead towards Tuesday, and really trying to do a better job. And I know this is not a gambling podcast at its core, but now that we're talking about it a little bit, really trying to do a better job lately of sort of illuminating the other things going on in games that also contribute to the motivational angles. We're all about motivational angles. That's where we're fighting from here. And Monday's games certainly provided a little bit on both sides of that. As in what means more, revenge games, lack of superstars obviously contributing to certain stuff, bouncing back off of massive defeats, the blowout loss, bounce back game, all of these things came into play, and we learned a little something. And it's all small sample size, but as long as I continue, I think, to mark these things down as we go, and then I'll put a little note in my charts here that I need to work my way backwards from about mid-December to the beginning of the year to find out basically what teams are coming off of losses. When you're coming off of a loss, what does that mean? When you're coming off a giant loss, I try to find out if that contributed actually in any way to some of our revenge wins or losses. It could end up on either side. And then the revenge game when you got blown out in a previous one versus a revenge game from a really close loss or something kind of an in-between. I know that's like the original kitten mittens here, but there is an in-between in basketball. A loss of like 7 to 12 points. That's sort of like we lost this game. We didn't get embarrassed, but we lost this game. And it wasn't great, and we'll try to do better next time. So we'll keep an eye on all that stuff. From a fantasy standpoint, though, just to look back at some of the things we got from Monday, there was something I was watching in almost every single game on Monday night, which is kind of cool. A couple of teams that Utah-Milwaukee was not really a game we were watching, and then injury struck, so it became one we were watching. Memphis-New Orleans, no, that was something in that one. Lakers-Dallas, not really a game we were watching, and even after the fact, I'm not that interested in it. But that was it. I mean, I feel like there was at least one thing, maybe Brooklyn-Boston, you could sort of wipe that one out because Boston got their guys back and Brooklyn rested some dudes on a back-to-back. San Antonio, we're watching Derek White, who continues to shoot the lights out. 9 for 9 at the free throw line, 4 for 7 from the field. Another terrific line, 17, 5, and 2. No threes, no steals, though, and no blocks, which is a little bit unusual for him. But it's something that we were sort of keeping an eye on with Derek White, is that he's not a three-point shooter. And the fact that he was hitting some tied directly to the fact that he was shooting 85% over the last week. That's an absurd number and an unsustainable one. Now, kudos to the Spurs. They've got things figured out. They're just beating people left and right now, home and road. It doesn't matter. And Derek White's been a big part of that. He's playing big minutes. This was one of his bigger minutes of the year, actually. He'd been sort of stuck in that 29 range, and he hit 35. He played the most, actually, on the whole team. So because of the opportunity, I get it. And I know that on podcasts I've said that there's certain things about his fantasy game that have me just a little bit reticent about what he'll be the rest of the year. But as long as he's taking super efficient shots, then at least the field goal percentage is going to be good. It's not going to be 85%, but he could be a guard that gets up near the 50% mark. And that's useful. He's a good foul shooter. 9 out of 9 is not an anomaly. He's actually pretty good from the line. And he does stuff in the defensive category. So, by all accounts, by my own doing, by my own statements, he should be the perfect Dan Besbris kind of guy. As I said many times over the offseason, I think the new hard categories are steals, blocks, and the percentages. I think those are the overlooked categories where 4 out of 9 categories, you can just sort of lap them up while other people are ignoring it. And Derek White, by all accounts, is actually good in all 4 of those. So why is it exactly that I'm not more juiced up about Derek White? I don't know. Maybe it's the complete lack, for the most part, of rebounds and assists. Perhaps it's the lack of three-pointers. Perhaps it's the fact that I don't necessarily believe he can shoot as crazy high as he has been, that there has to be sort of the opposite end of this wild run. But that's no reason to fade a guy long-term. That's a reason to fade a guy short-term. So I think maybe sometimes I talk myself out of stuff, and this may be one of those spots. But I will put the disclaimer that he only takes 1.7 three-pointers a game. Even as a full-time starter, he attempts like about 2 per game. And the fact that he was making 1 or 2 was a testament to the fact that over this crazy hot stretch that he's been on, and he shot 4 for 6, this is the last 5 games now, 4 for 6, 8 for 9, 8 for 11, 8 for 9, and then 4 for 7 again last night. Over that stretch, he's made 6 three-pointers. Over that stretch, he's attempted 8 three-pointers. He's not, certainly, as efficient as he might be, going to shoot 75% from three-point land. So he's not going to be a three-point guy. He should be able to get you some steals. The blocks number will probably level off a little bit. He's a decent shot blocker because he's not a small dude at 6'4", point guard 6'4". That's decent size. And so I like the steals, I like the blocks, and I like the percentages, which are going to drop off. And then the other stuff is trailing a little bit. But those 4 categories are ones that I like. So who the hell knows what my problem is? I think maybe there's a little bit of a dip coming, and maybe that's the point where you make your move. No one can shoot like this forever. Nobody. Not even the best of them. But this is one where I think maybe I talked myself out of it, and he'll end up being a decent fantasy guy. I think Brewski on our Friday show was saying, like, top 110, top 100 neighborhood, and that's not bad. But he's not going to be, top 30 or whatever he has been on this crazy hot streak. Otherwise, it was sort of the usual suspects for San Antonio. We weren't really paying close attention to those dudes. Rudy Gay missed this one. Been nursing that sprained wrist. At some point, he's got to just sit for a week or 2 and get it right. For the Pistons, nothing. No news is no news. Reggie Bullock hit 3 more three-pointers and did nothing else, and then Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are the last men standing. Detroit sucks, man. They're boring. They're boring and they're not good. That's a bad combination. I think they're boring because they don't have any fantasy stuff going on. They're now 17-21 after that hot start. They've pretty much been perpetually sitting at 3-7 in their last 10 games. They are 4-4 within their division somehow. And they're outside the playoff bubble. They're trailing the Brooklyn Nets, along with the Magic, who are also falling precipitously here over the last little stretch of basketball. Brooklyn-Boston was not a game we were paying attention to when we found out Shabazz Napier was starting. It was something to sort of take a glance at, but Joe Harris, a right ankle sprain is what the ruling was. My guess is that both he and Damari Carroll they just sat him because they didn't think they were going to win this game against Boston and figured, screw it, we'll get some guys some rest. And then when they started getting waxed, they just sat everybody down. And so Napier played 33 minutes, and Fareed got his weirdo 28 minutes, and Curicks got 28 minutes in this one. Dinwiddie 23, Russell 23. So they kind of flipped it. Kenny Atkinson said, screw it, this one's a done deal. And he just sort of booked the loss before the game began. So no, you're not buying in on Shabazz Napier. Because LeVert is not that far away. Rondé is not that far away. Damari's coming back. Harris is coming back probably in the next ball game. And then everything log jams again. With Boston, it was back to the old stuff. Too many mouths to feed. And then they blew a team out. So it was sort of a double whammy. Al Horford looks good. He's starting to get his legs back underneath him. Jason Tatum was fine. Kyrie Irving was fine. Marcus Smart played pretty well. Marcus Morris, coming back from a neck injury, was not great by his standards. Gordon Hayward went back to doing nothing. Jaylen Brown did absolutely nothing. And this is why Boston's a tough team to roll with. Just too many things going on. Utah-Milwaukee was going to be a game that we were set to skip over, and then Ricky Rubio blew out his hamstring. We don't know the extent of it. Apparently, he's going to be getting an MRI on his hamstring. But, I mean, listen, here's the bottom line with something like that. Even if Ricky Rubio is the fastest healer on planet Earth, hamstring stuff lasts. So he's going to miss, I would think, at least 1 week. Probably even a best-case scenario is missing 2. Dante Exum's ankle injury already has him out for 2 weeks. And that leaves one point guard left on the roster, and his name is Raul Neto. Which, by the way, I think in watching the broadcast, they actually pronounce that first name Raul. The R is like an H. It's Raul Neto. He had 10, 6, and 5 in 29 minutes of this ball game, and Ricky Rubio was done very early. So this is a pretty good, I think, barometer for what you could look for from Neto. He's not going to be taking many shots. What he does take is going to be of the largely unguarded variety. As a point guard, he's going to walk into 4 to 6 assists most ball games. I don't know about the 6 rebounds keeping up. I don't know about the 2 3-pointers keeping up. But he'll probably also fall into a steal at some point along the way. There isn't a whole lot, by the way, of portfolio on Neto. You got to go back a long ways. You really have to, you got to dig hard to find games where Neto played big enough minutes that you could say, all right, well, what's he going to do if he actually plays 30 minutes a ball game? He didn't play 30 minutes a game in any ball game all of last season. His season high was 24 minutes in a 40-point win over Orlando last November, in 2017. And he had 9 points and 7 assists in that ball game. So is that any kind of indicator? I mean, you can go back to 2006 and keep digging here on Neto. He just hasn't ever had this opportunity. Utah's always had point guards sitting in front of him. He had 25 minutes back in 2016. There was like a 3-week stretch where he was the starter for the Jazz that year, and he was okay, but he's not the same ball player. That's 4 years ago at this point. So there's really not a whole lot to go on with Neto. I don't know that we can say definitively what he will be, but he is going to be a starting point guard for an NBA franchise for probably 2 weeks or more. Does that put him in the DJ Augustine camp? That's my concern, is that he's going to do an Augustine. He's going to be 11 points, 5 assists, a couple of 3-pointers on okay percentages, but just no defensive stats and no rebounding, and nothing explodes for a big number. And that's boring. That's boring. I picked him up in a couple of spots. In one, in one of those spots is a team where I have 5 guys injured, so I desperately need every other guy on the floor to be playable, and that's about the closest thing you can get. In the other one, I have almost all of my guards injured, especially now with Darren Collison considered a game-time decision, so I just needed someone guard-eligible. So I'm not racing out to pick up Neto. As it turns out, I could use him in 2 spots for very different reasons. And if you're thinking about picking him up, I would compare him to DJ Augustine, hopefully with a tiny bit of upside, because the Jazz need scoring, I would say, more than the Magic. I know the Magic have been terrible in that regard, but Vooch, Fournier, Aaron Gordon are all in front of DJ Augustine. With the Jazz, it's Donovan Mitchell, and then it's a bunch of guys who don't really like to shoot. So it's a little bit less of a pecking order thing. Rudy Gobert is going to get his around the bucket. Derek Favors doesn't shoot very much. Ingles is more of a pass-first kind of guy. It's really Donovan Mitchell. And then a bunch of other dudes. Donovan Mitchell took 24 shots in this game. Jay Crowder, Derek Favors, 11 and 13, respectively. So there are shots available. And hopefully Neto can step into a few of those. We shall see. As I said, I picked him up in a couple of spots, but not all that excited about it, and neither should you be. Denver, we were watching the reintegration of some of the usual suspects, and then, of course, Gary Harris might have hurt himself again. We'll have to wait and find out how this whole thing shakes out. Late in the fourth quarter, he subbed out. I don't know if this is going to be a thing. This ball game was a wider spread than the 12-point final total would indicate. But if Gary Harris goes back down, then things open back up again. This is a rough stretch. He's a dude that can't stay healthy. Meanwhile, Austin Rivers did nothing for Houston, but P.J. Tucker woke up in a huge way. 7 3-pointers, 4 steals, and 2 blocks. Where the hell did that come from? And 0 rebounds on top of all of the other stuff. Houston didn't rebound at all in this game, and they won it anyway because they shot 50%. James Harden didn't even play that well by most accounts. 39% from the field, but Capella, Tucker, Gerald Green, all of these guys just went nuts. And they hit 22 3-pointers. Oof. That's an avalanche. And this is why we're concerned about Austin Rivers all of the time. All of the time. 1 out of 7 shooting, 1 for 2 at the free throw line. He did get you 6 assists, but not great otherwise. And in the midst of all of this, we got news that Chris Paul is still a couple weeks away. That the hope of him coming back in 2 to 3 weeks from the time of injury seems far-fetched now, and you're probably looking at more like the 4-week timeline, which we're about 2 weeks out from the injury, I believe. So probably another 2 would be my guess. He was taking some shots, so he's not like a month away, but it's probably a couple more weeks. And so you can continue to ride this thing and see what happens. It's tough, though. It's tough. And P.J. Tucker had been rubbing people the wrong way for a while. He just finally got it cooking in this one and snapped a stretch where he'd been shooting about 30% for a month. We were watching Justin Holiday in Memphis. He only played 12 minutes in this ballgame. Garrett Temple played 32 and a blowout loss. That's a bad sign. And I know I ranted and raved on yesterday's podcast about the notion of a preemptive drop. I did also say multiple times he might end up getting dropped anyway, and this type of performance will get him dropped in a hurry. That ownership is going to go into the toilet. And I know this sounds insane, but I'm holding on a little bit longer. I'm putting him on my bench where possible. If you're in an unlimited games format, this is a spot where you just ride with it for a couple of games, and he's going to give you bad production probably. But there's a hope here that Memphis going out and trading for this kid, that they actually want to use him in some capacity. To trade for a guy, to give up assets, second-round picks, and young players to go get Justin Holiday and play him 12 minutes seems off-kilter. If he's just a backup, if he's just a substitute hanging out, waiting for somebody to get hurt, doesn't make any sense. Anthony Davis just took Marc Gasol and trashed him in this ball game, and then everybody else was pretty bad except Mike Conley. Elfrid Payton, 11, 3, and 4. He did get 3 steals in this game, but no 3-pointers. I mean, this is the warning stuff, and he's not going to be a big-time assists guy on this particular club. So he's going to be fine, but as I've said before, you're looking more at a top 125 guy than a top 90 guy. The Lakers sweep the season series from the Dallas Mavericks of all teams, and they beat them in Dallas. And this puts a little feather in the cap of the what's more important, the teams coming off of a blowout loss or a team trying to avenge an earlier defeat in the season. And this puts a bucket in the teams coming off a blowout loss. Luke Walton called out his young guys after they just got steamrolled in Minnesota. And that was yesterday in the morning. This is a back-to-back Minnesota to Texas. That's tough. That's a goodly flight. It wasn't a nighttime back-to-back, so at least they got out of Minnesota early. It was a day game on Sunday and then a night game on Monday, so they had a little bit more time in between ball games. This is not an easy back-to-back, and they didn't play particularly well in the first half, But the adrenaline got going at halftime, and they just shut the Mavericks down completely. Was it luck? Maybe some of it. But you create a little bit of luck by just playing harder. The Lakers played harder. Josh Hart was good. Ingram, one of his best games of the year. Lonzo Ball looked nice. JaVale McGee didn't have any blocks, but otherwise he did the normal stuff. And then beyond that, you've got sort of the clunkers. And as I was saying, I'm not really chasing this team. Josh Hart, I think I said on yesterday's show, he's your safest streamer until LeBron gets back, and he certainly made a case for himself in this ballgame, playing 44 minutes. Woof. Also didn't hurt that the Lakers got, a wildly inefficient game from, but Kyle Kuzma back to at least keep the defense a little bit more honest. He's a big piece of the puzzle, and now they're down to just LeBron and Rondo out. Mavericks are not interesting. They are thoroughly uninteresting as a basketball team. And then, of course, you got the nightcaps. New York and Portland, Orlando and Sacramento. We're watching Jonathan Isaac all the time with Orlando, and it's been nothing but frequent disappointment. And with Portland, Mo Harkless watch continues. With New York, Luke Cornett watch continues. We got a lot of things on our docket for these ball games. And so for the late ones, rumble on into these bad boys. For the late ones, things went strangely. The New York-Portland game, which was a cover, by the way, New York covering by a bucket, game they were basically in for the most part, so pretty reasonable. Didn't shoot well at all, and you got your sort of weirdo line from Emmanuel Mudiay. He ended up playing well, 17.7 assists, which blending in with all his other stuff. It's such a weird... Emmanuel Mudiay is one of those strange ones, right? Over the last month, it feels like he's been dunking on people. He's averaging 18 and 6 with a steal and a three-pointer, and he's done it on less than 2 turnovers a game, and that's still just number 142 over that month because he's taken 16 shots and he's made 44% of them. He's taken over 4 free throws and he's only made 72% of those. No blocks. The steals, threes are both relatively low by all accounts, and so there are limitations to his game, and that's why I always talk about him being more of a points league kind of guy. But he got the 3 steals in this one, so that sort of floated his value a little bit. Mario Hezonja, 14.7 rebounds and assists and 3 steals. What? That came out of nowhere. He did play, and he played well in his 14 minutes of the Knicks win over the Lakers back on the 4th of January. He had 10 points, a couple of boards, a steal, and a block. He's a fantasy magnet if he ever saw minutes. The problem with this New York Knicks thing is there's no rhyme or reason to who's actually out there on the floor. This is the second game all year that Hezonja's hit the 30-minute mark. The other one was October 22nd in Milwaukee. He played 30 minutes. He had 18, 4, and 3 with a couple of steals and 2 3-pointers. He is not, this is a third one. He played 36 minutes against the Bulls on November 5th also. I apologized. I whiffed on one. So it's a third time. Hezonja has a cutoff. It's not like the old man cutoff where guys like Thad and Marvin and Danny Green and Mo Harkless, and we'll get to him in a minute, need 30 minutes to be successful. With Hezonja, it's not quite that high. It's more like 27 because he can rack up stats a little bit quicker. He's out there and he's actually touching the ball and he gets shots up, man. He's not shy when he's out on the floor. Problem is, he went a long stretch where he just didn't even play this year. Multiple games where he just got DNPs over Christmas. He played 4 minutes, then he just didn't play for like 10 days. And then, all of a sudden, poof, out of nowhere. 14 minutes against the Lakers, 31 minutes against the Blazers. What does it all mean, man? Well, I like using that line. What does it all mean, man? What does it all mean? We're not buying it after one ball game, and luckily very few people are. He's a free agent in every single one of my competitive leagues, not owned in any of them, and for good reason. He's been unusable for the entire season. But with the way things go in New York, there's a distinct possibility that they start to move in a different direction. And I know the fear that you guys have is what happens to Tim Hardaway Jr. Well, we know he's been dealing with plantar fasciitis. He shot 2 for 12 in this ball game, and so they just sort of shut him down after 27 minutes. He'll be back in the next one. It's all maintenance for him at this point. Mario Hezonja, his minutes, it's not even really clear how they just reappeared. It came basically at the expense of Kevin Knox, who had been playing close to 40 minutes a game for a while and then played 21 in this one. And he was already a difficult guy to own in standard leagues because he was averaging close to 20 points a game over that stretch, but about 4.5 rebounds and basically nothing else. Exclusively scoring. That is all he was doing, and you knew he was going to run out of gas. You can't play a rookie 42, 35, 37, 36, 37, 37, 39, 41, 39, 37 minutes in games and not expect him to just run out of gas. He's played the fourth most minutes in the NBA since the beginning of December. That's a bit too much. So, does Knox get dialed back in favor of Mario Hezonja? We got some questions to answer with New York. Also, Luke Kornet only played 19 minutes in this game, and his Cantor saw 29 minutes, and it's part of what makes that center position battle a difficult one. It's why we keep saying, hold on to Cantor, and let's see what happens here. He could end up playing into more minutes back in New York. He could end up being moved to a team where they want him to play 22 to 25 minutes a game. Mitchell Robinson tweaked a groin in his return from an ankle injury, so he's back out for another couple of ball games. I am holding on to Luke Kornet wherever I can, but I also understand that that's not feasible for a lot of teams. So, for instance, in a spot where, and we've talked about this team before on this podcast, I have a team where I have like 2 guys injured, and on that spot, I'm sitting on Luke Kornet because it doesn't kill my team all that much. I can weather that storm. I have a different team where I have 5 guys injured. I can't sit on Luke Kornet in that format. I need everybody on my team to be startable every night. And with Kornet now, he's put up 2 duds in a row after 3 big ones. Such is the way of things in New York. So I got to go find someone else, maybe like a Raul Neto. Someone who I know I can just plug in there, and he's going to go top 110, and it'll hold down the fort until half of my team comes back from injury. Whatever the hell that might be. They're weeks away, man. I'm in real trouble. I had been on a pretty good stretch through most of, until the middle of December. My team had been in pretty good health, and then it just all came crumbling down. And all long-term stuff, all guys that are out anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. So there's just not a whole lot I can do about it besides sit on it and then try to make up some ground after they come back. Play everybody. Play everybody. That sounds like a marketing scheme for kids playing sports. So that's the New York side. Mario Hezonja, we got to see it again. Noah Vonleh is just chugging along. 16-14, 3 3-pointers in this ballgame. He didn't have any defensive stats, but it's hard to complain with as well as he's played this season. He's just been solid. He's a top 100 guy, and he's just sitting right in that range pretty much perpetually. The only thing you could ask for from Vonleh is shoot the ball better. Stop taking so many 3-pointers. You're like 6'8", 6'9". Get over near the rim. I like that you're making a 3-pointer a game, but in generally the places I have you on my team, I have you for your rebounding, defensive stats. So go do some of that instead. It's okay. I won't kill you for not taking so many 3-pointers. Tim Hardaway Jr., I moved him in some spots because I didn't like his shooting percentage, but now he looks like a guy that's going to be very tough to move because of the plantar fasciitis maintenance days. What you ought to do with a guy like him is wait until he has a couple of decent ones in a row, see if you can trade him for, someone in that top 75 range, if at all possible. I know that's easier said than done. He was a guy that has now fallen outside the top 100 because of this prolonged shooting slump/injury thing. He was coasting along. Remember earlier this year? He was crushing it. First few weeks, he was a top 50 guy. And then fading. High volume, low field goal percent. That's what's really dragging him down. Mo Harkless asked out of this one. Left knee acting up. He didn't return to the game. He played just 8 minutes, and that is the death knell for him. For me, at least. And maybe you guys are more adventurous than I am, but it's just not my jam. You guys know I love Mo Harkless, too, so this is hard for me to say. But if he can't make it through one half of a back-to-back, he's done. It's time to move on. Mo Harkless Watch 2019 comes to an end. Mo Harkless, your watch has ended. All right, Game of Thrones is coming back in a couple of months. We can drop that reference. Jake Layman was the guy who actually played well with Mo going down. It was not Evan Turner, but it'll be one of those two guys on any given night, and it means neither one of them is really usable for you. Seth Curry's been slowly playing better. I don't think that this changes his outlook at all. Damian Lillard played only 32 minutes in this game. They sort of went easy on him when Portland had a nice lead in the beginning of the fourth quarter. And it doesn't really change the outlook for these other guys. All we were hoping for was that Mo Harkless could somehow get healthy enough to take the 30-minute small forward job, and he did ever so briefly, but now he's disappeared once again. Okay, Sacramento is the easy side of this late one. Marvin Bagley made his return. He played 20 minutes. Don't know if he's going to play on the second half of their back-to-back in Phoenix, but this is going to put a fat arrow into the heart of Nemanja Bjelica, who had 4 points, 4 boards, and 2 assists, and his fade from usefulness begins now. It was a fun run, though. He was very good for those weeks that Bagley was out. Bjelica was an easy guy to just plug into your lineup. Forget about it. He was going to play his 28 to 32 minutes a game. He was going to get his smattering of all sorts of different stats. He was doing it on a good percentage, but that's now slamming on the brakes. And if you're in a games cap league, get him out of your lineup before he uses up any more of your bad ones, or any more of your good ones on a bad one. The hard part of this late game is the fade and the hard fade of the Orlando Magic. For the second year in a row, the Magic got off to a pretty good start on the NBA campaign, and for the second year in a row, as they've hit the dog days, things have spiraled pretty hard. Magic have lost 3 games in a row. They've gone from being okay on the road to being pretty bad on the road at 7-12. They're 6 games under 500. They are, to their credit, only 2 games out of the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, but the difference between the Magic and the Nets, who currently occupy the 8th seed, is that the Nets are playing well. They're on the upswing. They've won 6 out of their last 10. They're good both home and road lately. The Hornets are basically a 500 team all season long. The Heat have been playing better of late, and then once you get above those dudes, then there's just nobody within reach. So you've got the Pistons, the Magic, and the Wizards, who have all convinced themselves that it's worth trying for that 8 seed right now. Great. Fantastic. How long before they say this isn't going to work? The Magic, in particular, have about a month to figure this thing out because they've got an incredible trade chip in Nick Vucevic. Stellar trade chip, super small expiring contract. So wherever they send him, the team doesn't even have to pick up much in the way of cash. It's easy to match on something like that. You can use draft picks and cheap rookies and whatever to... I mean, he's only making $12 million, I think, this year. 10.5 was the average over the course of the contract, something like that. Unbelievably affordable deal for a guy of his caliber. And are there teams out there that could definitely use a center if they want to make a push? The question is, who out there wants to try to get over that hump and who needs a center? You could argue the Lakers could use one, although JaVale McGee's been pretty solid. And if you have JaVale McGee, might not be a horrible time to consider trying to trade him after a couple of good ball games. I love JaVale, but there is the possibility that the Lakers could try to bring in a center. And they have the expiring contracts to move small forwards and wing guys for some other position out there. They'd have to send some picks away with it. Question is, do the Lakers think that they actually can compete for a championship this year? If the answer is no, then there's no point in sending stuff away for other than for the purpose of acquiring more assets to use on a superstar later. But there are plenty of teams out there that could use a guy like Vooch. The Clippers, I mean, they've got Marcin Gortat. I don't know if they have the pieces to make it work, but they could definitely use a guy like Vooch. Just looking up and down the Western Conference, the teams that are competing, I wouldn't know that I'd go to too many others. Warriors have Boogie coming back, but who knows how good he's going to be. Eastern Conference, you've got all these bubble teams that might consider it. Hornets could desperately use a center. Could any of the good teams out east use a center? No, I don't think they'd mortgage anything for it. So you got a few opportunities out there, not a ton, but such a good player. And if they do decide to sort of punt on this season, then you get this look at guys like Mo Bamba, who's surprisingly heavily owned because I think people were just like, you know what, he's going to have to do something. This is a guy who's doing nothing so far this year. He's top 230 That's awful. He's not playing. Played 13 minutes, he had 5 rebounds and nothing else in their last ball game. I mean, people are really squatting on this dude. Other than in a keeper format, I don't fully understand that one. But at this point, if you've held him this long, then you might as well wait to see if somebody gets cleared out. Does that mean that they'd move other guys like Augustine at point guard? And then does Jaren Grant play a bunch of minutes? They've got some veterans on that team. Terrence Ross probably counts as a veteran. I'm sure teams could use a floor spacer like that if they wanted to move him out. Something I hope that frees up Jonathan Isaac and or Mo Bamba. That's the real key in all of this, because as things currently stand, those two guys are useless. I love Jonathan Isaac. I love his stat set. I love his ability to rack up defensive stats, but he's out there just floating around aimlessly. And even the Magic blogosphere is writing about it during the game. They're like, oh, Jonathan Isaac, another 10 minutes of just floating around doing nothing. He is not engaged. They don't look for him on offense. I mean, I'm putting this on the coach, man. This is on Clifford. You have to find a way to get your young guy involved. Because guys like Vooch and Ross and Aaron Gordon and Evan Fournier, these guys are all going to push their way to the front. They're all going to see the big vat of stew at the front of the line, and they're going to shove their way to the front of it. Jonathan Isaac, because he's not a skilled offensive player, he's not going to do that. And then when you lose the engagement factor, then everything else changes. And right now, there's no excuse for not incorporating him more. The rest of this team is playing horribly. Terrence Ross finally had a better game yesterday, but he'd been on a brutal downslide. Vooch, he's sort of coming back to earth a little bit. Evan Fournier hasn't shot the ball well this year, which has been a huge disappointment. He was a late-round guy for me in a lot of spots. I figured he'd just sort of coast along near the top 100, and I suppose he's not all that far off from that mark, but the low percentages have been crushing for him. Even the free throws he can't make these days. Made him yesterday. Aaron Gordon, he's one of the most overrated players in the NBA. He's outside the top 100 in 9 category now. Because both of his percentages are terrible. What are you doing at power forward? Shooting 44%. He's a horrible iteration of Blake Griffin. I have so much beef with this Magic team right now, but it doesn't matter what my beef is with these guys, that Aaron Gordon has gone hyper inefficient and he's still a young dude, or that Fournier is just having an off year, or that Terrence Ross gets in there and just chucks. He touches it, it's going up. It doesn't matter that I'm annoyed by this stuff. What matters is that because this stuff is happening, Jonathan Isaac has no room to operate. None. He's just stuck. And what do? Well, I admit, I had to move on in a couple of spots. I tweeted about it over the weekend. I might have even mentioned it on yesterday's podcast, but I can't remember. In places where I need a healthy body, I couldn't sit on him. He's done nothing. I mean, he's one of the worst players in fantasy over the last couple of weeks. What did he have? Like 2 points and a steal and a block? He's been atrocious. He's not shooting the ball well. He's doing nothing. He's playing 25, 26 minutes a game. He's out there getting a steal and a block, but there has to be something more. So I don't blame you. Here's the thing, though. It's always darkest before the dawn. I tweeted that a couple times yesterday, too. At some point, he's going to bottom out, and the Magic are going to realize that they've ruined a good asset here, and they're going to have to try to fix it. There's still time, guys. There's a lot of time to make this right. You just have to let the poor kid do some stuff. Give him the ball once every 9 possessions and just say, hey, John, go try to do something. If it doesn't work, pass it off. Just let him touch the basketball. Anything at all besides just standing on the wing and watching. Because that leads to missed defense. That leads to a lack of energy. This is not rocket science. This has been the case for front court guys as long as I've been alive. You have to let them do stuff every once in a while. And he's playing small forward, so I'm barely even a front court guy. So I get it. If you need to move on, you can move on. I do think that there's a bottoming out point coming for Isaac and for the Magic, at which point they'll be forced to actually utilize some of their interesting young talent. I just don't know if it's going to be tonight, tomorrow, or, month and a half from now, or whatever it is. So be on the lookout. He's going to be pretty heavily owned in leagues. He's owned in still like 80% of my important fantasy leagues, and it's because of that upside. But I also understand that if you're sitting on him and you need to be using that spot for something, there you go. I want to take a moment here in the middle of the podcast to remind everybody again that we've got this crazy deal going on, and I think there was at least one of you that was tweeting me about it, and hopefully I got that situation rectified. Coupon code on top of insane deal right now. The Hoopball in-season premium membership is as low as $6.99 for January, February, March, and half of April. $6.99 for 3.5 months. That's easy math to do, man. 3.5 months, $7. That's $2 per month to get all of our premium written content, our live interactive shows with me, with Brewski, with the rest of the pros here at Hoopball. It is super. It is, I would argue, maybe the biggest in-season premium package out there just from an interactive standpoint. I don't think anybody else, there may be more tools at other websites floating around out there, but I don't think anybody is as accessible as the Hoopball pros if you have that premium pass. So go to hoop-ball.com, click on the premium tab, choose Go Premium, and then one of those options, I think it just says Get In-Season or Get In-Season Premium Package, and it'll show you the price. It'll say $9.99, and it's that price for 1 week. And if you have a coupon code from one of our podcasts way early on in this season, and you can ask me for it, I've got them written down on a notepad document that I started way back just to make sure that I had a marketing sheet of just a list of everything that I had done for this season, so I didn't forget anything. You can ask me for a coupon code. All of those are still functional and can drop that from $9.99 to $6.99. It's awesome. You get the schedule grid right out of the chute. You get the streaming grid right out of the chute. You get nightly pickup reports. You get nightly interactive podcasts. In fact, last night, our good friend Hank Aaron, Corbin Ford, those guys hanging in there. You get Brewski's waiver wire show. You get Brewski's lineup show. It's a hell of a deal for $7. So again, if you need a coupon code, you can ask me. I still have that list. I would just have to look it up, and I'm happy to do so. If you'd like to dabble in our in-season premium stuff, I would suggest that you do. And by the way, if you got another couple of dollars on top of you, go check out Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company again. I had to remind you twice because I did such a poor job of reminding you yesterday. At HI Kona Coffee, by the way, if you want to give them a follow on Twitter and talk about fantasy sports with them. They'd love it. They'd love it. Tell them Dan sent you. And just go talk about who your pickups of the night are. Be fun for all of you guys. All we want to do all day is just talk about basketball, right? Right. Tuesday night, another 8-game card on the docket. Indiana at Cleveland. We've heard there might be some lineup shuffling with the Cavaliers. I doubt it makes any difference. And we also got a report that Kevin Love is likely out through the rest of January. So the hope of him coming back in the next week, which I think we knew was basically dead when he was just starting his basketball activities last week, that's usually more of a 3 or 4 week ramp up at that point from a big surgery. So let's hope he's back by the beginning of February. That's my new target date, and we'll see how that goes. So at least you've got that pushback, which means maybe you bought a little more time for a guy like Larry Nance. I don't know, honestly, because guys just rotate in and out. And it sounds like Jordan Clarkson might get a little more opportunity with the starting unit. He's owned in a lot of places because he'd been scoring a lot of points. You know how I feel about points. I don't care for them. I mean, they're fine. If somebody just gave them to me, I would take them. But overall, not hunting for them. Washington is in Philadelphia. The Wizards playing well these days. The John Wall-less Wizards. Don't underestimate them. Jimmy Butler likely coming back to the lineup for that ball game. Atlanta, they've been playing oddly well of late, too. And they're catching 14.5 points in Toronto. That's a lot of points. Toronto getting close to full health as well. Not a whole lot from a fantasy standpoint we're watching in that ball game. Miami hosting the Denver Nuggets. Nuggets on a back-to-back after a tough one in Houston. They fly east and lose an hour. This is going to be a difficult game for the Nugs, especially if they're losing bodies again. Miami coming off an embarrassing loss at the hands of the Atlanta Hawks. That's one to put a little asterisk next to. Teams off embarrassing losses. Don't underestimate it. Oklahoma City, and of course, from a fantasy standpoint, Miami is getting dangerously deep in that too many mouths to feed territory. Whiteside, Josh Richardson, that's about it. 9-cat. Points league, you throw Justice Winslow into the mix. Can you trust Derek Jones Jr.? Some days, sort of. Can you trust Olynyk? Nah. Tyler Johnson? Nah. James Johnson? Nah. I'm out. I wipe my hands like a blackjack dealer. My shift is over with Miami. Minnesota at Oklahoma City. This would normally be a non-issue. We already have word that Derrick Rose is sitting this one out, so fine. He plans to play in their following game on Friday. But, of course, you've got the post-Thibodeau era beginning. Thibodeau, I'm going to do this right. Post-Thibodeau era beginning in Minnesota. Do any of the rotations change? Does Taj Gibson lose minutes to Dario Saric? How does it all take place? Is something to keep an eye on. I would say watch this game closely. I'd be pretty surprised if Little Saunders, whose first name eludes me now, Flip's kid, makes massive changes right out of the chute. I think this is the type of thing that probably would have been discussed with Tom Thibodeau anyway. But don't be surprised to see little changes. Like if they go on a short losing streak, Dario moves into the starting lineup. Little stuff like that could happen. I just don't know that anything's going to change so dramatically other than the culture. Maybe more three-pointers as they go to a slightly more modern NBA. Other than that, I wouldn't change too much. Sacramento, back-to-back in Phoenix off a home game. That's a pretty good little jaunt. And Phoenix might be without Devin Booker. That's what I was thinking of there. I knew something that needed to be mentioned. We'll obviously look for updates on that ball game. Josh Jackson would potentially do more. Everybody would just have to do a little bit more. Charlotte is in LA to take on the Clippers, and we don't care other than Jeremy Lamb being considered a game-time decision for this one. If you were using Willie Hernangomez, you probably can continue to do so. He certainly played well enough to earn a few extra minutes in this one. But do they deploy Bismack Biyombo to try to deal with Montrezl Harrell at times? I don't know. That's why it's hard to use Hernangomez in a games cap format, because he could just do nothing. I hate to throw guys out there that just could do nothing. And then the Warriors are laying 18 points to the Knicks on the second half of that back-to-back. That's a big number, ladies and germs. That is a big number. Woof! Obviously, we'll keep watching the same stuff on that New York side. And just kind of at the end of it all here on this coming Tuesday slate, I think I mentioned already that I really like the Miami Heat on that bounce-back game, and all of these things we're going to be sort of putting into the notes. Line movement, all that, whatever, that's probably the one that I like the most, even more than the traditional revenge games. But I will be keeping an eye on all the other ones, and then anything that is interesting going into them, we'll put that down on our sheet. From a fantasy perspective, we just sort of glossed over some of these things and already mentioned, what we're keeping an eye on in a few of these games. There's the Miles Turner situation in Indiana. There's the new lineup in Cleveland. Washington, as Otto Porter continues to gain more minutes in his return, pretty curious how that impacts Jeff Green. That's the guy that I've been talking about as probably the dude that starts to get phased back a little bit. I bet we do see some Jan Mahimi in this game tonight, because otherwise Joel Embiid will just go crazy on Thomas Bryant. So if you're riding the Thomas Bryant wagon, just look out, because fouls might be coming in this ball game. But otherwise, I like the way Washington's been playing lately. I think Otto Porter being back is a big deal for them. They've got all these solid small forward, power forward options, and now they actually have a pass-first guard that's starting to utilize them a little bit. So, we'll see how that shakes out. I think this will be I think Philly's going to get a little bit going here, and I think you're going to see angry Jimmy Butler in that ball game. I mentioned Miami is sort of too many mouths to feed right now. Denver with Gary Harris maybe being back out. There's all these little things going on. Nothing that I would call your traditional homework assignment for the game, other than. And I've talked before about watching individual teams play. I think it's worth watching Minnesota with the new coaching situation just to see if anything immediate goes down. But we'll get a better idea when Derrick Rose likely makes his return on Friday. And that's about it. Like, everything else is just sort of watching injury situations. Does Jeremy Lamb come back for Charlotte in this ballgame? Does he need a tiny bit longer? Willie Hernan-Gomez versus Bismack Biyombo. There's all these little things going on, and I'll make sure to send out my what to watch for tweet so you guys can get a feel for each individual nugget going on. And the last thing I want to mention on today's podcast before we wrap things up is our DFS contest. It's been moved back to Wednesday this week. We'll have that link available for you. I'll be getting the automated email sent out. If you've asked me to put you on that mailing list, you will receive an email from me today with the room link. DraftKings getting us the link a little bit on the late side here. We only have like a day and, what do we have, like 18 hours between the time of recording this podcast and when the actual contest begins. So I don't know how crowded the room is going to be. Maybe a little bit less than last time, just because there's sort of a shorter lead up. But what I'd also say is, if you're interested, whenever you see the link or get the email, just hop on into the contest. And that way we can get, I think, a better idea of how many folks are going to be playing in it. We've also changed one thing in the contest. This is by my request. So if you're pissed about it, you can yell at me. Instead of the top 10 winning $30 a piece, we're going to go top 20 winning $15 a piece. So more winners, smaller prizes, but more winners, which I think is more fun. You don't have to be in that top echelon. And then if there's a handful of really good DFSers out there that are often, chewing up 3 or 4 of the top 10 slots every week, this gives the rest of us, myself included, a better opportunity to get in the money. Top 1 is still going to get that hoop ball t-shirt. Top 2 or second place. Who says top 1, top 2? First place and second place get the bonus prizes. First place, of course, from hoop ball, and second place from Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter if you want to holler at them after you win second place in the contest. So again, that's tomorrow. That's on Wednesday this week. We'll send the link out as soon as we make it available. And again, if you'd like to be on the mailing list just for that DFS contest, I promise, if you say, I'd like the DFS email, Dan, I'm going to put you in a folder, a list that only gets emails when we open up DFS contests, or, I don't know, maybe down the line we'll have some other DFS promo going on. But right now, that's it. Wanted to mention, by the way, one little piece of breaking news this morning. Rudy Gay expected to miss a couple of ball games while dealing with that nagging wrist injury. I don't know how much it changes things for whatever you were doing with your San Antonio Spurs anyway. But if you're sitting on Rudy Gay, that sucks for you. And I am in 1 or 2 spots. So, hooray! Can't escape one freaking day without a guy getting injured or re-injured. Wonderful times are these. Big thank you to my buddy Gil Alexander for having me on VSiN this morning. If you ever want to hear me talk more about gambling, that's the spot to do it. Holler at me on Twitter. Having some fun today. I'll be at my computer most of the day working on other projects. And that'll be that. Tomorrow, Micah Patria on the show. We'll talk DFS leading up to the contest. Thursday, you're stuck with just me. And then Friday, Brewski on the pod. That'll wrap our week up. Have a lovely Tuesday, everyone. I am Dan Besbris, at Dan Besbris on Twitter if you'd like to give me a follow. This is a Hoop Ball presentation. Fantasy NBA Today, signing off. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.